Well, hi, and welcome to the Nurse Leader Lounge. We are so excited to come to you guys today, and we have a special guest, Cy Wakeman, with us. And I also have my partner here, Dr. Norma Tirado, and I am going to let her introduce Cy to you. Norma?
Yes, I'm a big fan of Cy. I've read all her books, and Cy is a drama researcher and New York Times bestselling author and recipient of the #1 Global Leadership Guru Award for 3 years running. She's deemed the secret weapon to restoring sanity to the workplace and the world place. So she works with organizations globally to ditch drama, hardwire accountability in their teams, and turn excuses into results. And I know, Sai, there's a lot of organizations asking HR leaders to how they can get leaders to be accountable. So that could be a really interesting discussion. She's the founder of Reality-Based Leadership. She inspired audiences to modernize their approach to leading their teams, which enables them to succeed in spite of the challenging circumstances they face. Her thought-provoking insights capture the hearts and minds of attendees of all backgrounds, helping them realize that success and happiness in their careers is their natural state once the drama is gone. So your clients are impressive. You've had Google, Meta, Viacom, NBC, Universal, Keurig, Dr. Pepper, NASA, Pfizer, CVS, Johns Hopkins, Stanford Medicine, Bank of America, among others. So with that, I'd like to introduce Cy Wakeman. Welcome to our podcast, Cy.
Thank you. I love the concept for the lounge and love that you're providing another place we can discuss some of these tough topics that leaders not only face, but sometimes it's what starts their fantasy about wanting to leave the field.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
More skilled. You can do great things.
That's right.
Awesome. So, Psych, I've always tell people that my mission in life is to make workplaces more human, inclusive, resilient, and fun, because we spend so much time. And I know that you talk a lot about let's make work human. Can you tell us what do you mean by that?
You know, it has a couple of different angles that I mean by it. One is I think everybody needs to really understand their own human condition,
Mm-hmm.
which at times has us showing up in our most primitive ego-based state. And only by understanding that we have parts of us called ego and how to use good mental processes to transcend those and really understand our human condition and work beyond that. It's so important to have that human piece to work. But I also think we forget in the midst of doing hard things and calling people up to greatness, we forget to love people up. And, you know, it's more than just filling somebody's cup. It's walking through a world in a way that people feel seen and heard, but not necessarily supported, including with others or seeing the world in a limited way. So it's that beautiful balance of, I see you, I hear you, I hold space for you. I validate your experience, and I'm not going to validate the sense you're making of your experience. So I'm going to see your humanness, and I'm going to call you to be something bigger than that primitive self. So, you know, I think that's all about keeping the human at work.
That is a great way to put it. I love that. And I think, you know, it's so interesting as we look at nurse leaders, especially since COVID, you know, just the last 4 years, most of our nurse managers who are managing that front line have become leaders since COVID. So they're new and they're babies and they're still hearing things like, well, just let people come in and vent, or, you know, they just need to decompress. And I think that that call to greatness that you're talking about, one of the questions I have is, I loved what you said, what I've heard in the past. So I want to hear you say it again for our audience around how do I have that conversation? So when somebody comes in the office, oh my God, Bob, I just have to tell you about Bob, you know, and they start having that conversation, their ego's involved and they want to vent, if you will. What's some of the advice you give leaders around that piece?
First of all, in my work, I don't want these leaders to just unskillfully shut down people sharing feelings, but
Right.
in my work, we look at venting not as sharing feelings. We look at venting as a behavior like worrying and not a feeling. And so once you understand venting is a behavior, it's a coping mechanism, and it's really a poor coping mechanism. It really gets neural pathways formed that can be fed only with more venting. It gives you a big brain cocktail of like, dopamine plus cortisol. I mean, it feels good, but it's so long-term damaging, both for the hangover one has after venting, the lack of actually working through anything. I think it's really a key way that people enable and keep people in the victim mindset and really fail them as leaders is letting people vent. So when people come in and they want to share a feeling, I'm so frustrated. I feel under-supported and I need help. Okay. Listen to people's feelings.
Right.
When they turn into making sense of their feelings, I feel under-supported becomes no one around here helps with anything. I do everything. I'm surrounded by jerks. We have crossed a line from feelings to a story or sense we're making of this experience. And so leaders need to do, the two things I just talked about. We need to love people up. I see you. I validate this experience you're having, but I won't validate the sense you're making of this experience. You're into some venting. I would rather teach you and help you. And what we know from especially COVID and all these new leaders is there was some trauma that happened during times of COVID, and not everyone's what we know from the research when people have had like a spinal cord injury, and we've watched how some emerged transformed for the better post-traumatic growth, and some emerged traumatized and bitter. We look at what's the difference, and they've been able to really identify two key differences. The people that emerged out of trauma, kind of like not traumatized, had people in their life who held space. They didn't apply toxic positivity, like, oh, keep a positive attitude or be resilient. They didn't weaponize anything. They just said, that was tough. Yeah, we didn't have what we needed. That was tough. It's still tough.
Yeah.
And held space for that, but at the appropriate time started to introduce multiple positive possibilities in that it's tough. And if we come together in new ways, we can, ensure that our patients are still safe. Like they're always talking about moving energy away from why we can't or why we're doomed to what if we could, how could we? And that's why I say a lot that leaders aren't managing the work of people. That should be standard care, safe care, and automation, and all the things we know in healthcare. But they are managing the energy of people. And if somebody comes in frustrated and you allow the energy to go into venting, you have really just mismanaged the energy and the opportunity of that interaction.
Right.
That was one of the places that I wanted to go today, that you talk about leaders managing energy, not people, and how we move people from we can't to how can we.
Yeah.
I know in one of I think a podcast that you were at, you share a really great example of a nurse that had gone into a patient room and they were setting her up for the wrong surgery and how she came out. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I thought that was a really great example.
Thank you. Dr. Norma, my internet broke up a little bit. So tell me that story again that you heard on the podcast.
That was the story where the nurse went in and the patient who was supposed to have some minor surgery was being prepped for like a hysterectomy.
Yes. And a lot of people have heard that. We just recently sent out that keynote, a replay of it that I gave at the Magnet conference, which is the first time I told that story. I think that's where Amy and I first connected. So it was in a intake, and a nurse, was doing all that checklisty work of just making sure the patient had informed consent and what they thought they were going to have done, we were going to do. And as she is going through all the details, the patient becomes almost like hysterical. And she's like, I want out of here and like, get me my husband and my clothes back. And so the nurse turned her attention to the patient because her response was so out of proportion to kind of the work being done. Come to find out there was a mistake in the medical record. And the patient had come in for like kind of a cosmetic nose job, but a little bit more medically necessary, and was being prepped for a partial hysterectomy. It was just one of those horrific moments in healthcare, but also why we check 5 times before we do anything to you, and we draw the Sharpies on your body. So the process was working. But what happened for the nurse is she immediately did what I call toggle down. She calmed the patient down, but she was furious, and she came looking for me as a leader. And she was telling me her story. You know, admissions doesn't care about the safety of our patients, and their mistakes kill people. And I'm the only one who like does anything around here. And I'm sick of cleaning up people's messes, and it's my license on the line. Like, she was venting. And I turned directly towards her and, you know, asked her to take a breath, and as a counselor, you don't meet people's energy with the same energy
I hate the
that
internet.
you just, um, uh, you know, transcend that. And I was there for her, but I calmed down. I was very curious, very compassionate. And I just asked her a question. I'm like, if you were great right now, what would great look like? And what that did was it took her out of venting, because you can't vent and self-reflect at the same time. And so I gave her a very kind choice. And I just posed a question in a very kind way. And then she got to choose, do I want to keep venting, or do I want to put my energy another place? And she put her energy another place and came up with some solutions, and went back to the patient regulated emotionally and with a lot of options that I didn't those problems or telling them what to do any longer. It's inviting them to get into their like best intellect and use their entire knowledge base and go back in and respond differently. And she was able to do that. But I think as leaders, we let people vent, but we don't try and get them reflecting. And the true diffusing of drama comes through self-reflection.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what I
so-
love about that is that leaders, we think we have to solve our people's problems.
Yeah, we're fixers.
We fall into that trap of, I'm going to give her the answer to this, and I'm going to support her by saying, yeah, you know, the other department messed up, I'm going to go talk to them. And what I love about your approach, and we've read in a lot of leadership literature, is that the job of the leader is really to ask a lot of questions, right? To bring people, like you say, bring people up to greatness. So that's absolutely a beautiful example of doing that.
Yeah, and I think in healthcare, we always use the excuse of it's urgent, or if patients involved and we have to intervene. And I think that's, you know, a convenient excuse. Emergent situations where people are taking their time with what intervention they're going to do, because they're being very evidence-based and very careful that as long as they've got, you know, an airway and a heart beating, they're like, let's think about what we should do next for this patient. And we're pulling consults and we're asking each other questions. And the patient, that's a true emergency. I've seen that in the ED. We feel as leaders, though, like if we don't jump in and solve people's problems, you know, something horrible will happen. And it's just lack of discernment, first of all. And then secondly, when we do that fixing, we simply reinforce to people that they are the victim. This is a circumstance you should never have to deal with. Please escalate to me. Also, you're not capable of impacting this. And so I don't believe in you and your potential. We encourage you to, you know, bring everything to me, and I don't leave you better off. I leave you dependent on me. And that's not leadership. So I love that you brought that up. We've got to quit fixing stuff for people.
Yeah.
I had a situation recently where I've got some conflict between a couple of team members. And in the example one of the team members gave, they said, well, people come to me for these answers. And I said, yes, but the other person is supposed to give those answers. So why aren't you redirecting them? And how does that make that person feel when you steal that from them and you take away the validation of their expertise, the validation of their value as a team member, because you're jumping into everything? And they just sat back and went, I didn't even think about that. I just thought, oh yeah, I can reply to this and I can take care of that. versus take the extra time to manage your team member up
Yeah.
and to engage in a positive way so that when you have something you do disagree with, you've got more of a trust relationship and you don't have that hard feelings that are between each other that, are things that we can control, right? Yeah.
So true. That's such a great example. And I think it's a disservice to people to just give answers. And,
Yes.
and what I would rather do when people come to me is in the call to greatness to like restore their own faith in their ability to deal with tough realities. Because otherwise people keep coming to me to report reality. They're like,
Right.
hey, did you know we don't have ideal staffing today? I'm like, thanks to the reality report. Like, did you know that we have non-compliant patients today? Again, sounds like more reality. And what happens when we fix it is we give them the message that you should only have preferred realities. And what I like to do is say, you know what, given this unpreferred reality, which is not colluding, because it's not naming it positive or negative, it's just an
Right.
unpreferred reality.
Right.
Given that, where do you need to get skilled in next so that you can walk through this more happily and more efficiently and more skillfully? I would rather grow you so that you could move through tomorrow's reality joyfully. And that's
Right.
just about skill. Then, it's the same reason as a clinician, I would get assigned somebody who, is struggling with schizophrenia. And because I had a lot of skills with that population, it excited me, that patient
Mhm.
excitement, where it would not excite somebody else with less skills in that area. So what was the difference between our excitement? It was more our skill level. Now there's some, whether, we like that work or not, but I really believe in giving people the skills so that they can walk through reality more freely. And I think that's the best gift we can give people is skilled independence.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that.
And what we
So
complain about in healthcare is that no one is a skilled independent anymore. I hear that complaint all the time. They're like, oh my gosh. Well, a lot of leaders have their job defined by what people would like from them,
Mhm.
rather than what will grow our capability to be able to serve the populations we want to serve. And that's a different role as a leader. People are like, just give me the answer. And I'm like, not my role. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not your Wikipedia. And
Mhm.
people would ask me all the time, they would be like, how would you code a for a while? And I would just say, how are you thinking of coding that? And what's your hesitation? And what are you worried about? And, what helps you make these decisions? Was it with lab? Was it without? Like, and at first people get mad. They're like, just give me the answer. I know you know the answer. And I'm like, I'm giving you the way to think about finding an answer of me. And we have to retrain those people.
Yeah, for sure. I
that's
know I
good.
feel that way about my kids quite frequently, so.
So Cy, quoting another great leadership writer, Adam Grant, he also talks about unlearning the things that we have come to believe are truths that are really not truth. And that just reminds me of what you said was your best advice, that stop believing everything you think. So
Yes.
talk a little bit about that.
People do ask me like, what's your best advice? And I do say that, stop believing everything you think. I think part of the human condition is we believe our own thinking and we believe our narrow interpretations. And those narrow interpretations are usually manufactured by the ego, and they're meant to protect us. They're meant to limit us. They're meant to, for us to step down and have a reason why we had to. And I think a role of a leader, influencer, whether it's my colleague or I'm their actual formal leader, is to help people question your thinking.
Mhm.
Is that true? And is that giving benefit of the doubt? And is that the most compassionate, curious explanation we can offer for this? Like, is it the most open? Because the more open we can be and curious and open-minded, the more solutions we have in front of us. And I had a situation during COVID. I did a lot of coaching in healthcare virtually because the people, at the bedside and the chair side and the street side were working their butts off. And some leaders asked me to work with a nursing team, and I gave them some space to share. They're like, Cy, we don't have the equipment we need. We're endangered. And I mean, it was true. We were using, UV lights to like clean their mask. I mean, there's nothing untrue about what they said. There were equipment shortages. What they went on to say is, so obviously this is proof our leaders don't care about us. And I mean, obviously, if they did care about us, they would get us this and they would do that. And I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Okay, you stated some facts, but now your ego has added this story to it, like your leadership doesn't care. So let's say that's true. Your leadership doesn't care at all. What are your options? Like, how could we get what you need? And they're like, well, if leadership doesn't care, there's no way to get it. Locked every option, one belief, locked every option. I go, well, what if we just suspended that? What if leadership did care about you? What if, let's just entertain another side to this story. What if they did care? Then what would you do? All of a sudden, people came up with all these ideas. They're like, well, we think we can get stuff from the dental offices, but we would need for them to, and I'm like, so if leadership cares, we have a lot more options. And they're like, well, yeah. And I'm like, so since it's just a belief, I like the options. Like, why don't we change our belief and just for today, believe leadership does care. They called me in. I know these leaders, like they do care. What if they were just as human as you, got caught by this and don't really know what to do? Well, would that change things? Well, it changed everything. And so the one question, like, what do you know for sure, is a question when you're feeling stuck in a narrow alley. That one question loosens the ego's grip that it has on your reality. And it lets some light in. Like, what do I know for sure? Not much. So if all I know is I need better equipment, what could I do to get that? It opens up a whole world. And it also puts us right back in accountability, because a lot of people are like, Cy, how do I get my people to be accountable? One, stop enabling them to be unaccountable. And two, have them question their thinking, because if you can loosen the ego's grip, there's space in there that next is, what can I do to help? And that's the point of impact. That's accountability.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I was listening to one of your sessions this morning just to refresh my brain before we talked today. And one of the pieces of change management you talk about, especially when that negativity is happening, is have that reverse brainstorming, if you will, that let's do the negative brainstorming for a minute. What are all the ways this isn't going to work? Let's get that out of the way so we can deal with that. And I think that's a really powerful tool.
Thank you. In the book, No Ego, well, in all of our books, we put tools in, and tools are so important because the ego loves verbal communication and ambiguity. And what a tool does is it makes things conscious and visible. Our tools are super easy. You can draw them on, the whiteboard on your Zoom. You can draw them on a piece of paper in front of people. But what it does is it gets things out from behind the ego, and it changes the dynamic. Instead of me bringing somebody out in front of us, and then the two of us will work on how we're going to intervene on that reality. It just changes the energy immediately. But the one you're talking about, I used a lot, especially when we were introducing some externally introduced change, like we had a new computer system or we were changing a process. And what people would do is they would immediately focus on why we can't. And they wouldn't necessarily have rationally looked at what they're bringing up as like how we could given that. So they were taking reality and making it into like the reason, story, excuse of why we can't. And they had a lot of opinions. And so what I would do when people were overwhelmingly negative about something is I would say, let's give room for that. Everybody is concerned, not the story. Boil it down to one sentence. What are the facts? What's your concern? And we would capture those in front of everybody, and we would give everybody a chance to talk and just get them written down. People feel so good about having it documented.
Yeah.
And then here's where the mental shift came in. I would ask people what their concerns were, and that's what I would title that column. And then as I would get it all written down, I would thank people and say, what you see as concerns are simply risks. And every decision we make has risks, and
Mm.
the team's energy is better used identifying risks instead of reasons why we can't. So I would just cross out concerns
Yeah.
or issues, and I would write risks. Now
Okay.
we can handle risks like
Mhm.
grown-ups.
Mhm.
Let's look at what's the true probability. A lot of people fear things that like won't ever happen. Or even if the probability is low, like a
And what
tornado.
if things to death, right?
Yeah, we want to plan for that if it has big impact. So I just get people looking at the risks. What's the
Yeah.
probability? What's the impact? And we explain how to do that in the book. And then we just talk about risk mitigation strategies. So how do we mitigate that risk? Can we accept it? Can we insure against it? Can we, transfer the risk? And quite honestly, every process we have in healthcare is a risk mitigation strategy. Every single process is a risk mitigation strategy. 2 signatures on blood, risk mitigation.
Right.
Check Elsevier before you remove a chest tube and review the video, risk mitigation. Like everything is figure outable.
Yeah.
And in healthcare, we act like we don't do a lot with risk. We accept a ton of risk. Patients accept so much risk. They're like, I still want the liver transplant. I mean,
Yeah.
just think of what we have people sign. This
Oh,
could
yeah.
happen to you in surgery. But I still want it. Like, I still wanted eye surgery that I recently had. And one of the things I signed off on was that blindness could happen. I'm like, sure.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I think we've
Oh.
got to talk like adults, because what people believe is like, we shouldn't have to do things that aren't going to work perfectly. And
Mhm.
I'm like, that's a limiting belief. We
Yes.
do things every day that we know have a chance of not working perfectly. That's why we plan for the risk.
Right. Progress, not perfection.
Exactly.
Yes. Yes.
Right. So one of the things that you say when you talk about change management versus change readiness is that change is only hard for the unready.
Mhm.
So how do you get people ready for a change that's coming without using change management? So help me understand that. And then the other thing is, I think you talk a lot about how much focus we give to the naysayer, so to speak, when probably the majority of people are supportive of the change. If you can talk a little bit about those two things.
Those are great. So somewhere along the lines, we have used change management to make sure that change is least disruptive to the team members, to the employees, the people.
Right.
And I really believe in that our role is to make change least disruptive to the patient or least disruptive to the business. And so with a focus on readiness, it for me is really how can we stay ready? Like we don't get ready for someone presenting in the ED with a heart attack when they present. Like we practice readiness. We have mock codes. And I don't think in our daily lives we practice readiness enough for the things that could come in. And a lot of people ask me, how do we keep people ready? And them.
Can you
Sorry.
repeat that?
Yeah, sorry about our internet connection. My number one answer is stop coddling them. Because it's not about keeping others ready. A lot of times it's about not enabling them to be unready. So for instance, if you expect me to bench press 150 pounds and you spring that on me and I've done no prep, then that's going to be pretty impossible. I may even think it's physically impossible, but it's not physically impossible. But if when I bench press 50 pounds, you didn't rescue me,
Mhm.
and then you increase the goal to 55 and didn't rescue me, then increase the goal to 60 and didn't rescue me, at some point, uncoddled, I will be benching 150 and it won't feel like I was forced to do anything. It will just feel like I got the next challenge. But
Mhm.
what we're doing is we're ignoring change and then it comes all at once. And then we
Right.
ignore change and it comes all at once. So the daily call up is what's important to me. And I think we call people up and we're disappointed. And it's this weird kind of codependent relationship. I don't know if
Yeah, I think
that
sorry.
helps. No, I don't know
Yeah,
if
no,
that
I think
helps.
it's that whole concept of buy-in, right? How do we get them to buy in? And I'm like, well, what are they doing to buy in?
Yeah.
You know, if we're transitioning this system, are they going to the classes we're offering? Are they taking advantage of what we're putting in front of them? I mean, how hard are we supposed to try if they're not going to? And I think that's one of those concepts that I love that you talk about as well.
Yeah, and the last question brought up the comment, change is only hard for the unready. I think we've really misunderstood why people suffer, and a lot of folks think they suffer because it's the change that was hard for them. But the same change can be experienced differently by two different people. And the difference we can find is their readiness. The unready found change incredibly hard, and the ready found it easier.
Yeah.
Um, But we
Well,
do pay attention to those naysayers.
Yeah.
And, instead of activating the silent majority, we overplay towards a few people who use veto power that they don't have.
Mhm.
And, a lot of folks sit back and they say, buy me in. And I'm like, buy-in's a verb. And by the way, I bought in when I took my oath in my particular field of social work. I buy in every day. I walk in, I make a choice that I will be an active participant in what happens today. And I see a lot of people give a lot of airtime to people that haven't even bought into the idea and yet are obstructing the idea. And you don't get it both ways.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And we see change every day and we accept it. Like I'm thinking of our phones.
Yeah.
There are upgrades to our phone constantly. And we just say, yeah, upgrade. We don't even know what was up. The other day I'm like, I don't know how to figure out how to call my phone from my watch anymore because it changed. It went to a different place. Well, I didn't call Apple and complain about it.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
figured it out. I Googled, how do you do this? I tried different buttons until I figure out how to do it with the new upgrade. But it feels like in a lot of organizations, we kind of want to spoon feed, so to speak, our
Yeah.
people rather than have them kind of jump in, take a leap of faith. Like you said, take risks, manage risks. Um, that's how we can be ready for change.
Right.
Yeah. And we enable a lot of people to skip a lot of upgrades.
Right.
I see it all the time. And my background comes from addictions and stuff. We call it codependency, but I see it all the time. The compromises we make, and then people are left unskilled and unready, and then they suffer during change. And it can be just like, I would ask staff, I'm like, I need you to float to like med surge. And they're like, well, I'm a cardiovascular nurse. I'm like, they have cardiovascular systems in med surge. Like, but the more I let you not take, a post-operative patient or just that simple compromise of like, oh, you don't know how to, you don't know a lot about that particular type of patient. Well, let me reassign them. When I do that, I
Yeah.
make sure that you're unready now for 10% of our patient population. And I get specialties. I get it's hard for, somebody who works daily, like labor and delivery to, work neuro. I get
Right.
it.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about people who won't even go from labor to delivery. They're like,
Yeah.
I'm like, nope, they're both in the title. Like we called it labor and delivery. You work nursery sometimes, you work labor sometimes. Well, I
Yeah.
don't do babies. I'm like, then you're on the wrong unit because it's all we do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I just shifting the subject a little bit. I feel like we have to ask you this question because it's just so prevalent in healthcare right now. But the impact of AI in organizations at the same time that we're saying people are using, oh, you're introducing AI, but you say you want to make places more human. Those are contradictories. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, the ego loves to find all or nothing, either or scenarios, because what a great backdrop to be a victim in. And so what I do a lot is help people replace or with and. I thought you wanted to make work more human. Well, that's the ego just venting in a I thought, like, or in the form of a question, like, aren't we supposed to focus on this? Well, that's venting in the form of a question. It's not coming from a how can I help standpoint. Um, and so for me, I like finding the and when people accuse me of being contradictory, I help them understand that multiple things can be true. It's really an adult regulating, a co-regulating process we teach people in therapy is if you want to suffer less, realize that multiple things can be true. I can have wanted to leave that marriage and miss the person I left. Doesn't mean I need to go back. Like, and so in this case, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm glad that you brought in the humanity at work. Because that is an and here. We will be implementing AI and we will be making work more human. So let's talk about that. How do we do those things at the same time? Well, they're mutually exclusive. I'm not sure that they are, because I love the care I got when I went for my last mammogram, and I was so thrilled that they had a computer also do a second read on those, because the computer doesn't fatigue and they make less errors than humans. And, I got a good callback to make sure and get another test. And I was grateful for that. And it felt very human. And it also felt very accurate and like very good care. So yes, please. I want it more human, and I want you to use all the AI you can get your hands on.
Yeah.
Yes,
With
excellent.
all the tools in our toolbox, right? How do I put all the tools in my toolbox? Yeah, even as leaders, we're looking at, and I work with my educators, how do we integrate these things into our processes, because they're not bad, and I know that where I teach in school, we're talking about, yeah, they're going to use AI. Guess what, guys? They're going to use AI. So don't try to grade the paper to give them points off for using it. How do you integrate it proactively into teaching your class so that they use the tools right and still learn?
Yeah.
Love that
That's the
philosophy.
difference.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great
Given
example.
our reality, how can we? And most people go, I just don't. They're going to use AI, and I'm glad for them using AI. And I'll tell you why. Because if it is work that can be automated, I love how they're reserving their intellectual capacity for work that can't be automated. And
Right.
so I also teach, and somebody gives me AI. My favorite paper is, there's a credit at the bottom of the paper that said AI was used in the production of this paper. However, these particular thoughts are mine and mine alone. I'm like, awesome. Thanks
Yeah.
for doing the lit review via AI. I'm fine with
Right.
that.
Yeah, and especially because we have, like, I know I have a lot of foreign students, so they usually use AI too in translation and just to help them express themselves better. So I think that's wonderful. So Amy, do you have other questions, or are we ready for a quick round?
I was going to say, I think we're to the point where we should do the fun round. Yes.
Right.
Awesome.
Right. So quick round. Other than life is messy, live happy, things don't have to be perfect for you to be content. What book should leaders be reading right now?
I love that. I love that. They're reading some of the best books. Adam Grant, Brene Brown. Like, we just live in a time, Simon. People on the leadership side are more evidence-based. We are kind of the last to catch up. And so there's a lot of great researchers out there, but just read it.
Sorry, we're losing you, Cy.
And the language gives them.
We lost you for a second, Cy.
Repeat that because we lost you.
Okay,
Sorry.
I'll repeat that. So you can add together. I'm so sorry about the internet down here. I
Okay.
gotta go reboot things, I think. When I get asked what books I read, people are kind of disappointed because I don't read that many leadership books. Now, when I'm researching for my own book, I read some, but I want my voice to stay my own, and I don't necessarily want to, bring other people's work into what I'm trying to teach. But the books I recommend leaders read the books I recommend that leaders read are not leadership books. I recommend we read poetry. I read a ton of David White. He gives the human condition language that I also believe that leaders can't take people where they. So most of the books I read are like Byron Katie. She has great books on questioning your thinking, and I love reading, Eckhart and Eckhart Tolle and Michael Singer. Like, I read a lot of books on how to move through life as a more evolved person.
Yeah, that's great advice. Yeah.
All right. So what one movie or limited series is a must watch?
I don't think I share the demographic of most of your folks. I'm a documentary person. I
Okay.
don't watch a ton of TV, but when I do watch TV, I am either watching The Big Bang, which is like
Love
super
Big
open
Bang.
minded,
Yes.
or I love India. I've traveled there many times and I love Indian weddings. So I watch a lot of Netflix Indian wedding shows
Oh,
and just
that's funny.
that's my decadent. I love watching
Actually, I've watched a
Indian
few of
weddings.
those and it's amazing. Their process and all the richness of everything is so beautiful. And I love Big Bang. I think I've watched every episode straight through like 3 times, and I'll just play it in the background when I need a laugh sometimes. So
I am
Yeah,
from Puerto Rico, and all of the new novelas in Puerto Rico are from India.
oh, wow.
So my 92-year-old mother
Indian TV.
is basically watching Indian novelas translated into Spanish.
That's awesome.
So, what's your favorite sports team, if you have one?
Oh my gosh. I think I have to think about that, but it's probably going to be a women's basketball or women's soccer team. But since I've been watching them lately, the Yankees, and I know that's another unpopular, but I love me some Yankees. So
There you go.
Again, I'll quote my 92-year-old mother. She loves the Yankees. So,
It's fun.
from my part, you're in good company.
awesome. I love it.
How about what's your favorite place to travel to?
I've already mentioned India, but I would tell you any place with a mountain. So I just got back from hiking the Huayhuas Trail in Peru. We've summited Kilimanjaro. We've done Machu Picchu. I'm heading to Everest Base Camp in November. So
Look, that'll be
my
awesome.
favorite place to travel is a place with volcanoes
A
Nice.
place with volcanoes and
or mountains that I can.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, we may have to have you come visit me in Colorado and Amy when she's in Colorado.
Yep.
Awesome. I would love.
Oh, we lost you. Oh,
What's your favorite genre or artist?
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
What's your favorite music, artist, or genre?
Oh my gosh. I like indie rock a lot. But I would say I'm really getting into Mexican music. So there's a artist down here named Junior, and there's other kind of hip hop, but in Spanish. So I'm trying to learn Spanish. I'm listening to a lot of Mexican music.
Awesome.
Great.
Awesome. Well, do you want to give time for a closing thought?
Yes.
Norma?
That was my next question.
Oh,
Lastly, first of all, really thank you for joining us in this podcast. This is
Yeah,
really,
so
really
grateful.
good conversation. But I'd like you to close our podcast with your closing words of wisdom to our nurse leaders.
So I know a lot of nurse leaders and nursing staff is overwhelmed right now. And we're struggling with burnout. We're struggling with our behavior and how we behave when we're feeling burned out. And my final thoughts are, this is all figure outable, and we know a lot about how to move through these situations more skillfully and more happily. And so if you're feeling burnt out, or you're feeling, thinking thoughts like, I'm not sure I want to be in this field, it just doesn't have to be that way. That's not the only answer. The answer is you can be in this field and happy and make a difference. Learning new skill sets, and there's tons of great thinkers out there willing to help you. So don't lose faith. Just grow beyond your current stress.
Yeah, grow beyond. I like that. I like that a lot. Well, thank you again so much for your time today, and we really appreciate you joining us and spending this time with us. I'm gonna go ahead and stop here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.